And God said, "Let there be
The
light."
Lord says, "Let my people go."
I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
This is the Talkin Bible podcast.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Talkin Bible with me, Rohan Bell, and Phil Weardan. Hello, Phil.
Hi, Rohan. How you doing?
Back again. I'm doing good. We're back again for Wednesday's episode. We're talking about the Gadarene Demoniac, the crazy man on the other side of the lake.
Yes.
And how Jesus healed him,
Yes.
delivered him.
And put him back in his right mind and fully clothed.
Yes, that's right. A radical story. Yeah. So it's a fairly well-known story because, if you've been around church for a while, it's one that ends up in Sunday school stories and so on because he's, well known as being a crazy man. So what about just giving our listeners a brief overview of the story, just to put some context before we discuss a couple of points?
Okay, so Jesus was on the west side of the Sea of Galilee, and he decided that, he said, well, let's go over to the west side.
To the east side?
To the east side,
the other side, yep.
The other side. Jumped in the boat going over there, and as he arrived, or one version says two demons, the other one says one demon, but
one man.
One man.
Yep. I think one version says there were two men. One version says there were the other version says there were one man. Yeah.
Yeah, but basically, this man came running up to him who was full of demons and was naked and physically couldn't hold him down. The families had tried to hold him down, tried to put chains on him. Ended up he was running around the fields naked.
Yeah, amongst the tombs, it says. Yeah.
As an outcast and couldn't relate in society.
No, as a young Christian, I would hear that and I'd kind of sit in judgment on it. But as I've matured in pastoral ministry longer and seen the turmoil and trauma and what it does in people's lives, I have a lot more compassion for this guy.
Yeah.
I think early on I just thought, he's a crazy guy. But I realised that there's a story behind. We don't know what that story is,
True.
but I've been around long enough to know that when people find themselves in these kinds of traumatic positions, there's a story. There's something has happened. There's trauma in their world that has led them to this point. And so I have a lot more compassion. And I think that's what you're going to say. That's what Jesus had.
Yeah.
He had compassion for this man. He was obviously well known. I mean, Jews didn't even go to that side of the lake. So but somehow word had gotten out or Jesus knew from divine revelation about this man, and he was going to do something about it.
Yeah. And so Jesus talked to the man and cast the demons out in a spectacular fashion.
Sent him into a herd of pigs that rushed down the cliff into the water.
Yeah.
Not something you see every day.
No,
Guess what happened today, dear? That herd of pigs we were looking after? Well, they're all in the water.
Yeah. So, so they're boiled now.
They're all boiled, yes.
But which is really strange because Jesus didn't associate, or like being from a Jewish culture, don't associate with pigs.
No, you wouldn't have found pigs on the west side and the northwest side of the Sea of Galilee. They're only on the east in the Decapolis region, the Gentile towns,
It's sort of, and after he got rid of the demons, the bloke was there in his right mind, able to. Able to sit, not move. Like I'm guessing that he was being so full of demons that he wasn't able to sit. And be
it
calm.
says he was running around crazy.
And somehow somebody gave him some clothes, so he's then he was no longer this person to be feared.
Yep. So it says he goes from someone who could never be held in chains, would yell and scream and cut himself.
Yep.
It says. Which are all things that we hear today, to a person who encounters Jesus and instead of running around, he's sitting still. Instead of being naked and barely clothed, he's fully clothed. And instead of being insane, he's sane.
Yeah.
So that's a radical transformation because a man encountered Jesus. Yeah.
And so radical that the townspeople around there heard about it, because lost all these pigs, so it would have been a bit massive commotion going on, and the herdsmen went and said what was going on. So they
there was an economic
disaster.
It was an economic effect on the township to have all those pigs. Yeah,
and when the people came, they saw this bloke totally changed, totally transformed, and then they were all in fear.
Yes,
they were like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
this is freaking me out.
And Jesus actually They actually said, one of the Gospels says they wanted Jesus to leave.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, because they were freaked out by it.
Yeah, they didn't want to ask questions. They were like, "No, this is too much.
This is too much. Get out of here." And the man does too. He wants to go with Jesus, and Jesus says, "No, go back and tell everyone about what God has done for you."
Yeah.
And then we read, I think it might be Luke's Gospel. I think it's Luke's. We read a chapter or two later, Jesus goes back there again to that same region, and it says they come out and they meet him.
Yeah.
So that man's testimony it took some time to sink in, but obviously it sunk into the point where next time around they want to meet Jesus. These Gentiles, these non-believing non-Jews are keen to meet Jesus. So the power of a testimony that says this is what I was and this is what Jesus has done for me can rub off on people.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that's I guess the story. You had a couple of points in your notes that you just wanted to draw out there.
I just loved how Jesus was willing to travel out of his comfort zone. Well, I'm going to say the Jewish comfort zone of being around family and friends that are all the same, all the willing to go across. And it wasn't just a simple, jump in a speedboat and put on the engine. It was like it was the sails and the oars. Right. So
and we've been on the Sea of Galilee. It takes a while to get all the way across.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it wasn't. He was determined to do it to reach this one person who ultimately made a knock-on effect to everybody else.
Yes.
It was like he was willing to go out of his norm to reach and to touch and to help somebody else.
Yep. And he went across out of his own zone. We were talking the first episode on Monday about the parable of the Good Samaritan and, being able to be willing to be inconvenienced. This is Jesus inconveniencing himself and his disciples. Hey, guys, I've got a lesson for you. Let's head over. I can just sort of imagine them on the lake going, what are we doing going over here, Jesus? What's all this about? We don't go over here. This is the wrong part of the lake. You've lost the point. We don't go to where those places. We stick to our side. It's safe over here. And Jesus is almost knowingly going, I want to show you a lesson here. Yeah. Gets him across there, heals this man, and delivers him from this demonic oppression, and then gets in the boat and goes back again. And then the next thing that happens is he gets back and he meets Jairus wanting to heal his daughter. And then we talked about that episode too. He's inconvenienced by the woman with the issue of blood. So there's some stories here showing Jesus bringing about his kingdom by being inconvenienced. And so I guess what you're saying is, and I think I had a chance to preach when we were on the boat on the Sea of Galilee, and I told this story about how standing out here and you could see both shores. We were closer to the western shore. We didn't go that far over to the east for that boat trip, but you could see it over there, and just made us realise that Jesus will travel across the stormy sea to reach you because he loves you so much, and he'll do that and then jump in the boat and get right back again because his love is great. Sort of reminds me of John 4, the woman at the well. Jesus had to go through Samaria to reach this woman. It's the same concept. Jesus goes out of his way to reach us, and set us free. And he knew this man's trauma, and he loved him enough to do something about it.
It's a good reminder for me to sort of, who is a person who is in such a need?
Yes,
the need of Jesus' love.
Yep.
So.
For sure.
How can I show that to somebody else? It's just a stark reminder that, and not to be the Pharisee who sits on the other side of the shore and sort of says, I'm not going over there.
I'm not going over there. Jesus would say, come on, let's get in the boat and head over. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So now I just want to ask the question is, did Jesus mean to talk to the demons themselves or talk to the person and the demons spoke?
Okay.
And are we allowed to talk to demons or not?
Here's what I think. Look, I may be completely wrong. This is just my understanding and reading of the story. Entire doctrines of demon casting or exorcism have been built, and this story has been used as a bit of a framework for that, because things like Jesus says, what is your name? And you're shimmy talking to the demon, what is your name? And the demon answers, well, we're Legion because there's many of us in here. So out of that, built into that a fair share of paganism, mind you, I should say, which says this belief that if you knew the name of the spirit, that you could control the spirit. Yeah. And that was not unique to paganism. You see that in the story of Samuel in the Old Testament. Samuel's parents, they say, "What is your name that we may honor you?" But what Elkanah the father's really saying is, "I want to know who you are so I can control you." Because that was part of their belief, is that they could control. If you knew the name of the spirit, you can control it. And that's been built into theology around casting out demons and everything else. I personally think that's taking it beyond the context of what's being said here. I think Jesus is talking to the man. It's the fact that the man is so tortured and so traumatized that the enemy has been able to get sway over his mental well-being that means that they end up speaking to Jesus. But clearly the conversation is Jesus does not enter into a big discourse with these demons. He doesn't give them the time of day. And clearly they're afraid. So I've said this often. It's not the demons that threw themselves at Jesus' feet. That's the last thing they want to do. It's the man's desperation as he comes and throws himself at Jesus' feet. So even with all his torture, even with he was seemingly out of control and under the control of a legion of demons, there's still something in this man that's able to reach out to Jesus. So firstly, I would say no matter how traumatized you are, no matter how difficult it is, you can still reach out to Jesus, even if all you can do is throw yourself at his feet. And beyond that, you can't do anything else. But if you can do that, if you can reach that point, Jesus will show compassion and kindness, remembering he's come across the lake to meet this man. "What is your name?" he says. Now, the demons answer, but I have to assume it reads best that he was talking to the man, wanting to see who this man was or what his story was. He may have, I'm assuming probably he heard the story. That's my best guess. I don't really know. And I can imagine Jesus hearing a story like that and going, right, that's why I came, to defeat the powers of the enemy, to destroy the works of the evil one. I'm taking a boat trip. That's the sort of thing I think Jesus would do. That he would take a boat trip across there. So he talks to this man. The demons are fearful, and all he says to him is, "Get out." "Well, if you send us out, send us into this herd of pigs." Okay, that's it. He doesn't enter into conversation with them. So while I think that there is a place to, definitely we are given authority to speak to the enemy. And Luke 10 verse 11, Jesus says, "I've given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and overcome all the power of the enemy." So there's a place in which we can use our authority to speak to the enemy, and tell the devil to leave. Because Peter says, "Submit yourself to God and resist the devil." Well, how do you resist the devil? I think you resist the devil through at least part of that is speaking to the devil and resisting him, saying, "No place for you in my life, devil." So that's a speaking to the devil. I think there's also a sense in which resisting the devil is doing positive things as well, like loving God and doing positive things for your neighbor and all that. That's resisting the devil's work as well. But there is a sense in which we can resist the devil. All I would say is avoid giving the devil more airtime in your brain than is necessary. So you may need to resist, you may need to speak against the devil, but don't become so obsessed with the devil that the devil is somehow on a par with the power of God or with the Lord. Because Jesus clearly is supreme in this story, and the devil's afraid of the demons are afraid of him. So I would say that would be my thought, is keep your focus on magnifying Jesus as opposed to chasing demons. Looking for demons everywhere. I don't think Jesus set out to deliver this man of demons. He just set out to he didn't set out to sentence a herd of demons into a pack of demons into a herd of pigs. He set out to set a man free. The demons were a byproduct of that. The story is, more importantly, that Jesus set a man free of trauma and pain and hurt and grief and anger and forgiveness and all that sort of stuff, than that, the demons got cast out. That's the secondary of the story, not the primary of the story. Yeah.
But it's a bit of storytelling if you do it the other way around, though.
Yes, it becomes more easy to remember. And we probably tell. I mean, Jesus. There are other demons Jesus cast out. Yeah, like there was one that had a blind, says he was blind and dumb or whatever, and it says plenty of other times where it says demons were cast out. We remember this one more than the others because of the drama of it. Yeah. Yes, that's right, which is fine. But maybe there's an element of that in Jesus. It wanted this story to be remembered. But I still think the main purpose of the story is to remember that Jesus will cross a lake to reach you, rather than Jesus cast demons into pigs. Yeah, I think that's where we let ourselves down, when we make that the purpose of the story. Yeah. Good reminder. All right. Anything else there?
No.
Okay.
That's all.
All right then.
Good.
That's it for today. Well, we'll talk to you on tomorrow's episode, everyone. Talk to you then.